Hey everyone, welcome back to my podcast. I'm your host Sajad, and today it's just a solo episode, just me, and I kind of want to talk about a very, very important topic that I don't think is discussed enough, and that is about stress, and specifically stress geared towards college students. And I want to go through this episode and kind of talk about different types of stresses to college students, as well as things that I face, so a lot of like stories that I've faced, as well as certain remediations and solutions. Now, I do want to offer a disclaimer that if you're going through any serious like mental health related issues, I am not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, so seek actual proper help if you're going through that, if you're in need. But I want to just share some of my stories and ways that I've been able to overcome stress. And I also want to add another disclaimer that like this is a constant work in progress. Just because I was able to figure some things out doesn't mean I don't deal with stress at all. In fact, last year, after I graduated college, I dealt with my own fair share of stressors. So let's just get straight into it. I just wanted to offer those disclaimers. So certain areas of stress for college students. Obviously, we got academic stress in terms of getting good grades, trying to get that 4.0 GPA, or I know, for example, at Georgia Tech, where I went to, you needed to maintain, I think, like above like a 3.5 or something like that in order to be eligible for certain scholarships that paid your tuition. So kind of like that academic stress tied in with like the financial stresses and obligations that you may have. And on that point, like financial stress, because yeah, a lot of people have scholarships. A lot of people are going to college in which they need to maintain a certain GPA in order to keep going to that college. Otherwise, they simply won't be able to continue going to that university. So we got academic stress. We obviously got career stress in terms of getting a job or an internship. I know a lot of people like worry about that. Specifically, I know a lot of like freshmen or sophomores who may not be that qualified and they just keep getting rejected by every single internship, every single job out there, and that adds stress to them. Then they think that they're not like knowledgeable, or they don't have what it takes, especially compared to like some other people. So like kind of the comparison comes in there as well, which is a social stress to a certain degree, which is very real because everyone in a college environment, especially if you go to one of like those top schools, they're very, very competitive. So that's something to watch out for. And then there's obviously like family related stress in terms of the different obligations that you have towards your parents or towards siblings or towards like a cousin or like whatever that situation is. Or I know some people like in Indian or Asian households, their family puts a lot of stress on them to be very high achieving, and they sometimes do like the comparison of like, oh look, this auntie's son is achieving this much and you're doing what with your life, you know? And so that's another issue. Thankfully, I didn't really face much of like family related stress, but I know a lot of people do. So this is kind of like the areas that I want to focus in. And we'll see kind of as I ramble on if there's other areas that pop up. But first thing, academic stress. So in terms of wanting to get a 4.0 GPA, in terms of wanting to get A's in all your classes, in terms of just wanting to know everything, I think we can kind of break down academic stress into how it forms is one, your expectations for what you can achieve, your expectations for a certain grade versus what you're able to get, your expectations for certain knowledge that you want and what you're able to get. And I know specifically sometimes for me, like I would really get stressed out if a couple days before an exam, I didn't really know the material that well. I mean, I had my reasons. I would sometimes like be skipping class a lot. I would sometimes not like pay attention much, and then boom, stress, right? And then that's when people start pulling those all-nighters and start going night after night, which in my personal opinion, all-nighters are probably like one of the worst things that you can do for your mental health and probably even academic health. There's another side of this academic stress in terms of you studied really hard and then ended up getting a bad grade on the test and not sure like what went wrong, where you can really improve. And then you see some other people who maybe only study for 2 hours and then they do way better than you, or some people who keep skipping classes and they end up doing way better than you. So how do we deal with this academic stress? So I want to give this story. I give this a lot, but in my first semester of college, I was taking discrete mathematics, which for reference was a pretty difficult class for me. You see, I was good at math my whole career up until discrete mathematics, up until college. Like AP Calc, BC, multivariable calc, so easy. It was like so easy for me. But once I got into college and we got a lot of like these proof-based math classes, things got pretty challenging. And I remember, so the first test, I didn't really study much. I got a 99%. And at that point I was like, you know what? This is clockwork. This is easy. This is just like high school. You don't really need to study much and you'll be able to get good grades. But then the second test, I kind of had that same mentality and I ended up getting a 60%. And then I was like, oh shoot, college is serious. I actually gotta really study. I was a little upset, obviously, and a little stressed out because at that point, I got a 60% on an exam, which was very heavily weighted for your final course grade. And as a person who's gotten A's all my high school academic career up until that point, it became very, very mathematically difficult to average out an A at the end of the semester. So it was still possible, but I was kind of worried, But, I had some confidence in me. Obviously, I graduated salutatorian of my high school class. So I was like, you know what? I'll be fine. Let me figure this out. Then going forward to the third exam, I studied really, really hard, night after night. I never really pulled all-nighters, but I did study late into the night. And then I ended up getting a 70% on the exam after I studied really hard for it. At this point, I was like, oh shoot, there is something wrong with me, or there's some disconnect between me and the material in this class. So I really got to figure this out. And once again, I was somewhat a little more stressed because it was just uncertainty, but also in some areas I was a little less stressed for a weird reason, because at that point it actually became mathematically impossible for me to get an A in the class. And so I was like, I just need to get a B in this class. So now that's my mindset. Now for the final exam, I needed to score, I think a 85% to get a B, which was a different stress, but still the less pressure of needing to get an A in my head. My idea of a perfect 4.0, at least in my bachelor's, I ended up getting a 4.0 in my master's, but in my bachelor's, that need of a 4.0 kind of just extinguished. And I was like, you know what? I could get a B in this class. I could get a C in this class. As long as I pass this class, I'm chilling, right? And so then with that mindset going forward, the pressure was a little less, but I still had this other pressure of actually wanting to learn the material. But I think fundamentally, the lesson here is stress really comes from when your expectations and reality don't meet. And when you think that you have the capacity to change these things from taking your reality to the expectations, that's where the stress relies. It's in this gap. And so coming from the expectation of that 4.0 down to just being able to pass the classes, that helped me eliminate a lot of the stresses. So really ask yourself, when you're setting these goals, I know a lot of people have these arbitrary goals such as a 4.0 GPA in college. And me as a computer science student, GPA doesn't really matter. So that goal was to a certain degree baseless. It was just for the fact that I could flex that I have a 4.0 GPA, for the fact that I could tell people I graduated college with a 4.0 GPA from Georgia Tech. Woo, it's not really based on anything, especially in tech. GPA barely matters. Only one company in my entire history of applying to internships or jobs have ever asked me for my GPA, and they just wanted to make sure it was above a 3.0. And in fact, in my that semester in college, that my first semester, I got many interviews, a couple of internship opportunities, one namely at Amazon, and they didn't care about my GPA at all. So that actually my career successes in this regard kind of helped me offset this academic stress that I was facing. And I know some of you are oh, bro is just complaining about a B or C while I'm struggling. But it's kind of all perspective. As a person who is constantly used to getting A's, even getting 1B is pretty stressful. And you can kind of just take the main lesson out of this is understanding why you're setting certain goals and what it's based on. Now, if you're going to med school or law school where GPA matters a lot, obviously stress is more helpful there because that'll prompt you to like work a little harder. But for me, it didn't matter too much. And I'm guessing a lot of you are probably like in the tech field who's like watching this video. So just take that into account. But then in terms of actually, how do I remedy this? How do I actually focus on like how to learn properly? And for me, class wasn't really the best way of learning. For me, like I am not a person who learns well sitting at a lecture, having like the teacher or the lecturer just like shout material at you and just absorb it, because my like attention span and all those things are very, very different cadence to what the teacher usually goes over. I just wasn't simply grasping things. And so one thing that I did know about myself is I am a visual learner. I'm a hands-on learner. I need practice. Practice, practice, practice. Practice makes perfect. I cannot emphasize this enough. So what I started to do is literally like scouring the internet for like weeks on end. By the time exam 3 finished and final exam, I was spending hours on end every single day just focused on doing practice problems for this exam, and all the practice problems in the textbook on online Reddit posts like previous semester's exams that were released for students. I would constantly be just like studying that and practicing that all throughout the day, because you cannot think of yourself as a sponge. Humans are not sponges. We are habitual creatures. We need practice in order to make perfect. And so constantly doing practice problems. And in fact, I remember there was one specific problem that I did practice like constantly, and like I looked at it a couple hours before the final exam. That same problem was on the final exam. So just keep that in mind. Usually like professors don't have the capacity to change previous semester's exams to current semester's exams. They're usually just like finicky around a couple things. So if your professor does release previous semester's exams in the past, actually like ask to see if you can see a copy of that. Actually try to prepare using that. So that probably like would really help you out. So like shifting your expectations, but also like doing practice. And I seriously just cannot emphasize that enough. And I really hope that this helped you in terms of like academic stress. But now I want to move over to career related stresses, because this is probably like a really big thing that high schoolers and below don't really have to worry about, but college and above obviously do. College students are in a unique situation because they're kind of a mix of being a student as well as being an adult, having like a career life. Because in high school, you're worried about academics. After college, you're just worried about career. College is like the intersection where you're worried about both. And that just compounds with all the other stresses that you have going on in your life. So it's kind of sucks. And specifically when it comes to career stress, simply not having things figured out, not knowing where you want to go in life, what maybe you want to, at least in the tech world, maybe you don't want to code, maybe you want to be a front-end developer, maybe you want to be a data scientist, cybersecurity, network engineer, computer or hardware engineer. There's so many different opportunities, which is a cool thing, but it compounds with stress, right? Obviously, you don't know what you don't know. So that like just adds a little level of anxiousness. And also when it comes to actually getting internships and jobs, no one actually tells you what you need to do or what you need to worry about. They kind of just expect you, right? Like, I don't think I've taken so many courses about like, how to like learn computer science, but actually how to go from being a computer science student to landing a software engineering internship. Those are all things I had to figure out. Those are all things that I had to talk to alumni, talk to people, upperclassmen who've been in this similar situations, but there's no formal education for it, which kind of sucks because you would expect like a top tier university like Georgia Tech to like really give that over, but they don't really. People kind of just assume you need to know, you need to have a resume, you need to do interviews, you get the job. But there's a whole lot to unpack in both of those things. And honestly, part of the reason that I started this like YouTube channel, this Instagram page, TikTok page, was to actually help alleviate that, help people actually break into tech, because learning computer science and breaking into tech, very, very different things. But anyways, back to the subject, not having that figured out and sort of being directionless and not knowing what you don't know all adds into stress. But also comparison, seeing other people who have gotten really high paying internships, seeing people who may not know as much as you in the technical space, but still being able to land these high paying internships, that can contribute to stress. Even comparing like some internship salaries, right? That all adds into stress. And I can't really think of like anyone who like wouldn't be stressed when they see like a freshman getting a software engineering internship while they're like a junior and unable to get a role. So those are some things that you need to consider that add into your stresses. Okay, but how do we actually deal with these career-related stresses? And this actually brings me back to one story. I was talking to one of my friends. I was like, I'm kind of directionless in life. What should I do? And he told me, I think this is a pretty famous quote, but a ship that doesn't sail is not a ship at all. And I just couldn't think of like how true that is in not only like my career, but like life in general, you know? And specifically within career, people who are so worried about getting rejected by companies or maybe aren't sure of where to end up, just go ahead, apply to as many places as possible, send in your resume, get rejected, attend an interview, get rejected. And every time you get rejected, that's all that happened. Plus, you gained the learning of having done an interview. Maybe you understand what a recruiter likes in a resume, what they don't like. In fact, a lot of the stuff that I share on like my social media pages is from my past experiences, from my past failures. And so the only way that you can truly learn is either by like hearing other people's stories or actually trying it out for yourself. And always think the worst thing that they can say is no. So just keep applying. Maybe you want to try one summer being a software engineering intern. Maybe you want to try one summer being a product manager intern. Or maybe you want to take a semester off from school. Like you want to take a fall or spring semester off and do another internship just so you can see what the life is like. And honestly, like a lot of people, they face like imposter syndrome because they compare themselves to other people. They think that, oh, they're so much further ahead than me. They're so much further ahead than me. But I know a lot of people who have graduated college without an internship and still ended up being a six-figure software engineer. I know people who attended community or state college but still ended up being in big tech. You don't think that they would have had like some imposter syndrome? And the reason that I'm saying this is not to sort of discount like the credit of like the high achievers in college, but it's to provide an example of it doesn't necessarily matter of where you start, because the goal for you is not to be the first one to break into tech. It's not the first one to get a $50 per hour internship. It's the people who build a successful, sustainable, lifelong career, but life as well, because you got to make this sustainable. And in fact, I know people who got Facebook Meta internships early on in college, but then due to the recession, they ended up not getting a return offer. Don't you think that they would have been excited one summer? They would have thought they were at the top of the world, but now they're unemployed. So were they successful or were they not? Versus people who maybe didn't get an internship early on, but now have like really good offers, you know? So it's just, you can't really compare yourself to others because the tech world is ever so evolving, it's ever so changing, and just focusing on yourself and have the mentality that like just because other people succeed doesn't mean you're a failure, and just because you're succeeding doesn't mean other people are a failure. So try to work collaboratively. One thing I loved about Georgia Tech was how collaborative everything was, how helpful people were. I know some other colleges, like I was talking to one guy from UC Berkeley, and he was like, it's like cutthroat competition. And it's just very like vile how like people are just like so selfish in terms of like their achievements in academic and career. But at Georgia Tech, it was very, very collaborative. Reach out to me if you want a resume review. I do resume reviews on my Instagram and TikTok. And just unless you're a criminal or do something really, really bad, you will be fine. Like you can graduate without an internship. You can graduate and not have a job offer at hand, but just by how big, vast, and lucrative tech is, you will end up with a nice job offer. And in fact, another thing that sometimes stresses people out is like they graduate and then they get a job that only pays like $70,000, $80,000. And they're like, man, I really wanted that $200,000 juicy offer. And if you really think about like where that comes from, specifically like 200,000, it's like from all these like people, either like influencers or people who've been in the big tech companies who are like, oh, this is how much I make as an entry level engineer. But understand, first of all, that's very location and company dependent. And second of all, just because your starting salary is like 70, 80,000 doesn't mean you're going to be like a low baller your whole life. No, you're going to eventually get promoted. You're eventually going to potentially hop companies and you will get that fat pay bump. Now, whether it comes in 2024, whether that comes in 2025, 2026, it's just a matter of time. So just understand the game, and the people who are successful are the ones who are able to stay the longest in it. And so just if you're able to like push through that, ultimately, I think you'll be successful. And also this comes back to the point of just like practice makes perfect. And the more bad reps that you're able to get out, the more failed interviews you're able to get out. For example, before I got my Amazon internship, I did so many interviews. And then it was actually one interview that I failed at this one other company that I had a similar question at Amazon later on, and I ended up passing that interview in like the most optimal solution very quickly. So just kind of know what you're going up for and know that you do not lose out by doing an interview. You do not lose out by applying to companies. And another thing some people like think about, or some people worry about, is just the simple fact about applying to internships. They're like, oh, I'm not even worthy of applying to a certain company or a certain stature. And I'm like, chill out. You're literally so scared to becoming the lowest position. Like an intern is the lowest position in the company, and you're too intimidated to apply for that. That's pretty sad. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about is family-related stress. So specifically like in Asian households, I know a lot of people are like just pushing out, you need to achieve this, and this, because we set you up for success. We put you through education. We fed you. We financed your whole life up to this point. So you need to now go be like a doctor or an engineer and, you know, just like win at life to sort of validate everything that we've done for you. And if not, oh man, look at that auntie. She has a son who's achieved this at this age. So look at you compared to them. And they sort of induce like a lot of like imposter syndromes and bad feelings onto you. But how do you resolve this? And I gotta say, just like personally, thankfully, like my family was like really good about this. My parents did not try to compare me with anyone. And in fact, I went to Georgia Tech, but my parents would have been fine if I went to like any like lower tiered school, because it was a matter of, once again, building a successful life and career, not just being like an academic workaholic, not just being a career workaholic, but just being a balanced overall. And so this really comes from like how you resolve this is through like open conversations, understanding that your parents and your family, ideally, they want to look for the best for you. They aren't like out there to like hurt you. It's not like a cutthroat competition between you and your parents. It's you're working to a common goal. Both of you want success in your life. It's just that you and your parents have different approaches to getting there. One thinks of it in terms of like a purely like this to this, like A to B type thing. And like, I want you to get to this point. Why aren't you there already? But you see all like the stairs that you actually have to climb to get there. Like one sees it kind of as an elevator, like you should be up at this position. The other sees it more as like, you see it more as like a bunch of stairs that you need to climb. You need to climb this mountain in order to get there. So just understanding like the open conversations, or maybe like the career paths that you want to go into. Maybe you don't want to become a doctor or engineer, or maybe you want to pursue another thing, but also like being practical about it. So I know some people who are like, my parents want me to pursue this one field, but I want to go into like, I want to start my own business. I want to do this thing. But understanding like kind of like the money aspect about it, like it needs to make financial sense and logical sense. Now, I'm not saying you're always right or your parents are always right, but just having those open conversations, understanding like what your career path is, what your trajectory is, and not just focusing on the destination, but also like the journey itself, because parents sometimes make the mistake of like wanting you to be like a high achiever without actually like understanding what your struggles are here. But sometimes students make the mistake of saying that they want to become this type of achiever. They want to start their own business and do all this, but without actually like a concrete plan of getting there. Like, for example, like you're going to have bills. Passions don't pay bills, and you need to recognize that. And the parents need to recognize like what you actually want to do in your life and what'll make you sustainable and happy and hopefully have a lifelong career. Now, on this point, one thing that I love to tell people, one big question is I get asked a lot is money, is it bad to do computer science or tech just for the money? And I always tell people that, you know, it's not the best thing to do, computer science only for the money, but it does make it kind of nice because you can get like a remote like software engineering job later on, and then you can take all that money that you're earning from your high paying software job and fuel it into whatever passions you want. So maybe you can adopt these practices into like what you're doing. Maybe you can find like, if you're not necessarily passionate about what you're necessarily majoring in, try to push through it if you're able to, and then try to, once you're employed and you have like independent and you're pulling in a lot of money, fuel that to whatever passions you're about. Maybe you want to start a YouTube channel. Maybe you want to start a podcast. Maybe you want to start social media. Maybe you want to start like a lemonade stand. Whatever you are able to do it on your own capital, your own investment. And so then your parents, they'll be chill because you have like a nice career, but then you'll also be hustling and working because you have that passion, and now you also have the capital, your own capital and your own time and your own money going into whatever you're trying to achieve. Personally, this is like the balance that I think works best, but if you're not up for that, if your parents really want to push for you to become like a doctor or a lawyer, which requires a lot more education, then you should probably have like way more open conversations, very like early on. Okay, so in this last part of the video, I kind of want to talk about my own dealings with stress and how I'm navigating my own situation. And it's a work in progress at the end of the day, and what I'm doing and what I've sort of figured out. So I graduated college May of 2022. And after graduating, I thought that things would be chill. I wouldn't have stress. And I was like, I just have to work a 9 to 5 and then just have fun, enjoy life the rest of the time. But then, so after May 22, I moved out to San Francisco for a full-time job in June 2022. And immediately I had a lot of financial stress. It was my first time taking care of myself, first time, doing all the cooking, cleaning, but also like paying my own bills. Rent in San Francisco was $2,500 a month, food $700 a month, rent, utilities, everything was just like adding up so fast. And even though I was a software engineer earning 6 figures, I was like constantly worried about going broke because I was like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't spend here, or like, how do I allocate money? Because my whole life, my parents were sort of taking care of me. I never really had to think about these things, but I really didn't like it. Paying $2,500 a month in rent, just to wake up, go downstairs, see a lot of like dirt around the area, see homeless people. And like, it was still pretty far from like the office when I was there. And so it just wasn't ideal for me to be there. And another thing that was bad about San Francisco is I had no people. So social pressure, distance, just sadness, right? So then I decided to move to Atlanta for a couple of months, back to where I went to college, get to see all my college friends, have fun with them, live with them. And things were actually going much better. I started to have a workflow, like things were working well in terms of my job itself, but also things socially were pretty chill because I had all my friends and I was just like work fun, my 9 to 5 work. After that, I get to hang out with my friends. I was living the life. But then I started feeling kind of weird. I was like pretty unfulfilled about like what I was actually doing with life in general. I was just like working, having fun, but part of the stuff I want to do in life is, having an impact on people, teaching people, talking to people via social media, YouTube, and just like providing value out there to the world, which I wasn't really doing. I was just kind of like, in a sense, being selfish of like just having my own fun, right? And so actually last year, 1 year ago, January 2023, I decided to move back home to Virginia. And my main focus was just being disciplined, getting my work done, but also like, starting up this thing. I decided to invest in a $1,000 camera, got this backdrop and started posting videos online again. But then the other issues of like socially, you're not having much fun. Like I left all my friends in Atlanta, kind of sucked. And just trying to like figure out like your support network and circle. I was actually pretty lucky though. At the very time I decided to move back home to Virginia, one of my friends decided to move back home to Virginia as well. Like my best friend from high school decided to move back home from California, and it was pretty chill. We got to like hang out every now and then, but I also like got like a little like physically sick, and I was still sort of like figuring things out, and things were a balance of like things were somewhat getting better in a certain degree, but not so well in another degree. But after that happened, I had like a workflow, things were going chill again. I started posting stuff on social media. I was working my job. I was having an impact. Things were going great. But then a different type of stress affected me, in which I kept posting on social media. I was posting 2 to 3 times a day, but I was getting literally no growth. In fact, like I started having less fun. I started being less social. I started seeking friends out a little less. I stopped talking as often to some friends because I was just so like hands down grinding to social media. But there was no return. I think like after 3 months of continuously posting 2 to 3 times a day, I had like about like 1,000 something followers on Instagram, which I'm grateful for, but it's like, it wasn't ideal, right? But then things started to kick off in September. I started to get more growth, and I'm very thankful to where I am now. But through and through all this, my stress varying has been like constant. There have been times in which I've struggled to fall asleep. There have been times in which I like kind of felt like the stress really affecting me. And it's kind of weird. Like a lot of the stress really started hitting after I graduated from college. So it's not like graduating college solves all your problems, but it's more of like the mentality that you have in place. And so certain things that have really personally helped me out is anytime that I get stressed, there's usually some conversation I'm not having, or I have a lot of different things that are firing at all cylinders in many different directions, and I'm not accounting for it. And so whether that be I have these different tasks at work and I have to put these posts out, I need to talk to these people, I need to do this editing, I need to talk to my editor, I need to figure this out. Just like so many different things, but I'm not like tracking any of that. And then I open up my phone and I get all these notifications, and then I get distracted and I forget what I necessarily have to do. So I'm not joking when I say this, but like having like a paper and pen and like literally like writing down things that you need to do, that helps you out so much. And like section off, say like for my work I need to do this, for this class I need to do this, for this thing I need to do this, for this club I need to do this. And then once it's actually out of your mind and onto paper, you get some sort of like psychological relief, at least when I feel it, because like I know everything's being like tracked and I will be able to account for everything. But then in terms of actually like stress and sleep management, I actually ended up getting this Oura ring, which has been huge saver. There's the amount of data that's collected from this, the amount of like, it tells you what quality of your sleep, what your stress levels are throughout the day, what's your heart rate, and it just like really helps you manage and get an understanding of what's going on. But also like other than that, just like taking time for yourself, like taking a breather. Maybe you don't need to be super responsive to your phone. Maybe you don't need to respond to all the messages. You don't have to pick up every single call that comes to you. And just like understanding there is something called me time and you need to prioritize yourself. That has been, it's kind of obvious, but it's been a realization for me. In fact, my big goal in 2024, it's not to grow my social media. It's not to make a certain amount of money. It's literally to focus on my mental and physical health, because without good health, your wealth doesn't matter. You need good health to enjoy anything in life, to do anything in life, to have all that impact, to have like the work fun or impact anything that I wanted to do in the past. You need good health for that. So that's been my main focus. And, these things have sort of helped me out and just get an understanding that like, and not everything needs to be figured out right now. You just need kind of like general path in terms of where you're going and just make incremental progress every day. Don't worry about too much of like the day-to-day things. Just like try to focus on getting better, understanding what's not working out, having some serious conversations with yourself, writing things down, noting how you're feeling. I know journalism helps sometimes. I've never really dabbled into it. Maybe that's something I've picked up. But overall, I just hope that this episode was really helpful. I hope that everyone can like focus on their mental well-being and stress levels and hopefully build a successful lifelong career and life. Thank you so much. And make sure to subscribe and like if you guys enjoyed this video.